desert-born dragonkin, lay dormant until humanity asked them to fight. The red dust of Mars swirled around Minho's boots as he walked across the empty desert. His atmospheric processor hummed quietly behind him, one of dozens scattered across the New Sahara region. Each machine worked day and night to make the Martian air breathable for the growing human colonies. Minho wiped sweat from his forehead and checked his tablet. The temperature readings were wrong again. This part of the desert was supposed to be cold, but his equipment showed heat signatures that made no sense. The ground beneath his feet felt warm even through his thick boots. Another broken sensor, he muttered to himself. He had been working as a colonial engineer for 2 years. Most of his job involved fixing machines that broke down in the harsh Martian environment. The dust got into everything, and the extreme temperature changes cracked even the toughest equipment. But these heat readings were different. They appeared in the same locations every day, forming strange patterns across the desert floor. Minho had reported the problem 3 times, but his supervisor said the sensors were just malfunctioning. As he walked toward the next processor, something caught his eye. A glint of blue light flickered in the sand about 50 meters away. Minho changed direction and headed toward it. What he found made him stop and stare. A crystal formation jutted up from the desert floor, about the size of a small car. Its surface was smooth and dark blue like deep ocean water. But the strangest part was the light that pulsed inside it, dim but steady like a slow heartbeat. Minho pulled out his scanning device and pointed it at the crystal. The readings made him frown. The crystal was generating heat from within, enough to warm the sand around it for dozens of meters. It also gave off low-frequency vibrations that his equipment could barely detect. He called his partner Nara on the radio. "I found something weird out here. Can you come take a look?" 20 minutes. Later, Nara arrived in her rover. She was older than Minho and had seen most of what Mars could throw at engineers. Very little surprised her anymore. "What have you got?" she asked, climbing out of her vehicle. Minho pointed at the crystal. "It's generating heat and sound. I think it might be some kind of mineral formation we haven't seen before." Nara walked around the crystal, studying it from different angles. Probably just a geothermal vent. Mars has lots of underground heat sources. The crystal formation is unusual, but not impossible. But look at this. Minho showed her his scanner readings. The vibrations are too regular, almost like a pattern. Nara took her own readings and had to admit the data was strange. The crystal pulsed every 47 seconds exactly. Natural formations didn't keep such precise timing. "We should mark it for the geology team to investigate," she decided. "But we have 12 more processors to check today." They continued their work, but Minho couldn't stop thinking about the crystal. As they moved across the desert, he spotted 2 more formations. Both showed the same heat signatures and regular pulsing patterns. By the end of the day, they had found 7 crystals, scattered across a 10-kilometer area. All of them were identical in their strange behavior. "This isn't natural," Minho said as they returned to the colony. 7 crystals, all doing the same thing, all in the same region. That's not a coincidence. Nara had to agree. The evidence was too consistent to ignore, but she was also practical. Even if they're artificial, they're not hurting anything. The processors are working fine, and the crystals aren't interfering with the terraforming. That night, a massive solar storm hit Mars. The colony's power grid fluctuated as electromagnetic radiation bombarded the planet's thin atmosphere. Emergency lights flickered throughout the settlement as systems struggled to maintain stability. Minho was in the engineering bay, monitoring power levels, when his tablet started beeping frantically. The heat signatures from the crystal field were spiking dramatically. In minutes, the readings climbed higher than anything his equipment could measure. "Nara, you need to see this," he called out. She hurried over and looked at the data streaming. Across his screen, the crystals weren't just warming up, They were responding to the solar storm in real time. As electromagnetic activity increased, the crystals glowed brighter. "That's impossible," Nara whispered. "Mineral formations don't react to space weather." Through the window of the engineering bay, they could see a faint blue glow on the horizon. The crystal field was lighting up the desert like a constellation of stars. The next morning, Minho convinced Nara to take a closer look at the crystals. When they arrived at the first formation, they found it had changed overnight. The crystal was now twice as bright as before, and the heat it generated was strong enough to melt the sand around its base into glass. "We need to call this in," Nara said. "This is way beyond our expertise." Minho ran deeper scans while Nara contacted the colony administrators. What his equipment revealed made his hands shake as he read the results. The crystal wasn't a mineral formation at all. Deep scanning showed complex organic structures inside, arranged in patterns that looked almost like a nervous system. The vibrations weren't random either. They contained mathematical sequences that repeated in precise cycles. "Nara," he called, out, his voice barely above a whisper. "I think there's something alive in there." She rushed over and looked at his scanner display. The internal structure of the crystal showed branching networks that pulsed with energy. It looked like a brain, or maybe a heart, suspended in crystalline material. "That's not possible," she said, but the evidence was right in front of them. Minho expanded his scans to include the other crystals in the area. Every single one showed the same internal patterns, complex organic structures all pulsing in perfect synchronization. "They're not just alive," he realized. "They're connected to each other." As they stood in the Martian desert, staring at the glowing crystals, both engineers understood they had discovered something that would change everything. These weren't geological formations or natural phenomena. They were cocoons. Something had been sleeping beneath the sands of Mars for an unimaginably long time, and the solar storm had begun to wake it up. Minho looked at the dozens of other heat signatures scattered across the desert, each one marking another crystal formation, each one potentially containing another sleeping being. "How many do you think there are?" Nara asked quietly. Minho checked his readings one more time. The heat signatures extended far beyond their scanning range, possibly covering hundreds of square kilometers. "Thousands," he whispered. "Maybe tens of thousands." An entire civilization lay dormant beneath their feet, waiting for the right moment to return to the world above. Dr. Jisoo arrived at the crystal site 3 days after Minho's discovery report reached Earth Command. She brought with her the most advanced scanning equipment available to human science. As the colony's lead xenobiologist, she had studied alien life forms across a dozen worlds, but nothing had prepared her for what waited in the Martian desert. Colonial Administrator Wu Jin stood beside her, watching teams of scientists set up their equipment around the largest crystal formation. He was a careful man who preferred to study problems thoroughly before making decisions, but the readings Minho had sent were too important to ignore. "What are we looking at, Doctor?" Wu Jin asked. Jisoo reviewed the data on her tablet as her scanners worked. "The organic structures inside these crystals are unlike anything in our biological databases. They're complex enough to be intelligent life, but they've been dormant for an extremely long time." The crystal formation towered above them, now glowing brighter than when Minho first found it. The solar storm had triggered something inside, and the awakening process seemed to be continuing on its own. Minho and Nara watched from a safe distance as the science team worked. They had become local celebrities after their discovery, but they felt nervous about what they had unleashed. "Dr. Jisoo," called out one of the scanning technicians. "The internal activity is increasing rapidly. Whatever's inside, it's definitely waking up." Jisoo studied the new readings. The organic patterns were becoming more active by the hour. Neural networks that had been dormant for millennia were beginning to fire with increasing frequency. "Administrator, I recommend we extract the smallest crystal for detailed study," she said. "If we're going to make first contact, we should be prepared." Wu Jin considered the risks. Extracting an unknown alien life form was dangerous, but leaving it in the desert was also risky. If the being woke up completely, it might be frightened or aggressive. Do it, he decided. But take every precaution. The extraction took 6 hours. The crystal was smaller than the others, about the size of a large person, but it still weighed several tons. Heavy machinery carefully lifted it from the sand and transported it to a specially prepared laboratory in the colony. Dr. Jisoo and her team worked around the clock to understand what they had found. The crystal wasn't actually crystal at all, but some kind of biological stasis chamber. The being inside was alive, but in a state of suspended animation that had preserved it perfectly. On the 3rd day of study, the chamber began to crack. Everyone, stand back, Jisoo ordered as hairline fractures appeared across the surface. It's beginning to emerge. The process took several hours. The chamber slowly dissolved like ice melting in warm water, revealing the being inside. When the last of the crystalline material disappeared, Jisoo and her team got their first look at an awakened member of the ancient race. The being was humanoid, but clearly not human. She stood about 2 meters tall, with skin that shimmered between bronze and gold. Her arms ended in hands that had 4 fingers tipped, with what looked like claws. Most striking of all were the wing-like structures folded against her back and the small horns that curved from her forehead. Her eyes opened slowly, revealing pupils that glowed with inner fire. She looked around the laboratory with confusion, taking in the strange equipment and the humans watching her. She spoke in a language that sounded like music mixed with the crackling of flames. Her voice was beautiful but completely incomprehensible to human ears. Linguist Dr. Hana stepped forward with her translation devices. She had been brought in specifically to handle first contact communication. "Hello," she said in several different languages, hoping to find something the being might recognize. The being tilted her head and listened carefully. She responded in her own language, speaking slowly and clearly as if she understood that communication was the goal. "Her language is completely unknown," Hana reported. "But she's definitely trying to communicate. She understands that we're intelligent." Over. The following days, Hana worked tirelessly to establish basic communication. The being was patient and helpful, repeating words and gestures to help the humans understand. Progress was slow, but steady. The breakthrough came when the being touched a piece of Mars rock and spoke a single word repeatedly. Using context and repeated demonstrations, Hana realized she was saying home. "She's saying this is her home," Hana announced excitedly. "Mars is her world." Once basic vocabulary was established, more complex communication became possible. The being revealed her name through a combination of sounds and gestures. The closest human pronunciation was Kaylin. Kaylin explained through simple words and drawings that her people had lived on Mars long ago, when it was a green world with oceans and forests. Some great disaster had forced them into the crystal chambers to survive. She had been sleeping for so long that she had lost count of time. "How long?" Jisoo asked through Hana's translation. Kaylin drew patterns in the sand, showing planetary movements and star positions. When Hana calculated the astronomical references, the answer shocked everyone. "She's been asleep for over 50,000 years," Hana whispered. Kaylin seemed sad when she learned how long had passed. She asked about her people, using gestures to indicate the other crystal formations scattered across the desert. "Your people are still sleeping," Jisoo explained. "You're the first to wake up." This news troubled Kaylin greatly. She asked many questions about the current state of Mars and the humans who now lived there. She seemed particularly interested in learning why humans had come to her world. When Jisoo explained about Earth and human colonization of Mars, Kaylin listened carefully. She didn't seem angry about humans living on Mars, but she was clearly concerned about her sleeping people. Through patient communication, Kaylin revealed more about her race. They called themselves the Pirathi, which meant fireborn in their ancient language. They had been guardians of multiple worlds before the great disaster that ended their civilization. Guardians of what? Wu Jin asked. Kalen's answer, when finally translated, sent chills through the human observers. Guardians against the darkness that devours worlds. She drew pictures in the sand showing great ships that moved between stars, consuming everything in their path. Her people had fought these creatures across the galaxy until the cost became too great to bear. The darkness comes in cycles, Hana translated as Kalen continued her explanation. When it returns, worlds die unless someone stands against it. Jisoo realized they might have discovered more than just an ancient civilization. They might have found allies who understood threats that humanity had never encountered. Are these dark creatures still out there? Jisoo asked. Kalen nodded gravely. Her drawing showed the cyclical nature of the threat. The creatures would consume a region of space, then move on to digest their harvest. But they always returned eventually. When will they come back? Wu Jin asked, though he dreaded the answer. Kalen studied the star charts Hana showed her, comparing them to her ancient knowledge. Her calculations took days, but finally she gave her answer. The darkness was already returning. The consuming fleet was moving through distant star systems, working its way toward the inner galaxy where Earth and Mars waited undefended. Humanity had awakened not just an individual, but a potential ally who might be their only hope against an ancient evil that was coming home. Captain Sun-ho stood on the bridge of the patrol ship Defender, watching the long-range scanners display data from the outer solar system. His crew had been monitoring the edge of human space for 3 years, watching for asteroids, pirates, or anything else that might threaten the colonies. What appeared on his screens that morning was unlike anything they had ever detected. "Captain, we're getting massive readings from the Kuiper Belt," reported his sensor operator. "Multiple contacts moving in formation toward the inner system." Sun-ho leaned over the scanner display. Dozens of objects were moving through space, in perfect coordination. They were too large to be ships and too organized to be asteroids. "How big are they?" he asked. "The largest ones are over 10 kilometers long. And Captain, they're accelerating. Their speed is increasing as they get closer to the sun." Sun-ho felt a cold chill run down his spine. Nothing in human space was that large except for the biggest space stations, and those didn't move. These objects were clearly under intelligent control. "Send a priority alert to Mars Command," he ordered, "and prepare a probe for close reconnaissance." The probe launched an hour later, racing ahead of the Defender toward the unknown fleet. Its cameras and sensors would provide the first close look at whatever was approaching human space. While they waited for the probe data, Sun-ho's communications officer received an urgent message from Mars. "Captain, we're ordered to return to base immediately. All patrol ships are being recalled." The journey back to Mars took 2 days. When Sun-ho arrived at the defense headquarters, he found the place buzzing with activity. Officers rushed between meetings and technicians worked frantically at their stations. Admiral Yeonsu briefed him in the main command center. "Captain, what you discovered out there has changed everything. We've been analyzing your probe data, and the situation is worse than we thought." The main screen showed images from the probe's flyby. The objects weren't ships in any traditional sense. They looked like living creatures the size of mountains, with hulls that pulsed and flexed like muscle tissue. Smaller organisms swarmed around the larger ones, acting like protective escorts. "They're biological," Dr. Yuna explained from her position at the science station. "These aren't machines. They're alive, and they're consuming everything in their path." The probe had recorded the fleet stripping an entire asteroid field, breaking down the rock and metal and somehow absorbing it into their bodies. The process was efficient and terrifying. "How long until they reach Mars?" Sun-ho asked. "At their current speed, approximately 8 months, Admiral Yeonsu replied. "But we think they'll accelerate as they get closer to inhabited worlds." Sun-ho studied the data streaming across the screens. The approaching fleet numbered in the hundreds, each creature capable of devastating entire planets. Humanity's space forces would be completely overwhelmed. "What's our defense plan?" he asked. Admiral Yunsu looked grim. "We're still working on that, but we may have found some help." She led Sunho to a secure briefing room where a small group of officers waited around a conference table. At the head of the table sat someone who was clearly not human. "Captain Sunho, meet Kaylin of the Parathi," the admiral said. "She's been helping us understand what we're facing." Kaylin stood and nodded respectfully to Sunho. Her golden skin caught the light, and her wing-like structures shifted slightly as she moved. Despite her alien appearance, her manner was dignified and calm. "Captain," she said in accented but clear English, "your enemy is the same that destroyed my world long ago. They are called the Vex Collective." Dr. Unha brought up new images on the briefing screen. "Kaylin has been sharing data about these creatures from her people's ancient records. They're not just consumers. They're a hive mind that spreads across the galaxy in cycles." The images showed worlds stripped bare, their atmospheres consumed and their surfaces left as dead rock. The Vex had been doing this for millions of years, following predictable patterns as they moved from system to system. "How did your people fight them?" Sunho asked Kaylin. "With great cost," she replied sadly. "We developed weapons that could penetrate their biological hulls and tactics that could disrupt their hive coordination. But in the end, too many worlds were lost. My people chose to sleep rather than watch the galaxy die." Minho entered the briefing room carrying a tablet full of data. He had been working with Kaylin for weeks, learning about Parathi technology and biology. "Kaylin says her people are natural warriors," he reported. "They can fly in space without ships, generate intense heat that can melt through Vex hulls, and coordinate their attacks telepathically. But they're still asleep," Admiral Yeonsu pointed out. "Can we wake them up in time?" Kaylin looked uncertain. "The awakening process is dangerous. Many may not survive it. And those who do wake will be confused and afraid. They may not trust humans enough to fight alongside you." Dr. Yunha had been studying the Vex approach vectors. According to Kaylin's historical data, the Vex always scout their targets before launching full attacks. We should expect advance forces to arrive within the next few months. Sunho realized the timeline was even tighter than they had thought. "What kind of advance forces?" "Smaller bioships," Kaylin explained. "They map defense capabilities and locate the most valuable resources. When they report back to the main swarm, the full attack begins." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Humanity was facing an enemy that had consumed countless civilizations, and their only potential allies were still sleeping in crystal cocoons scattered across the Martian desert. "We need to start the awakening process immediately," Admiral Yeonsu decided. "Captain Sunho, you'll coordinate with our engineering teams to establish awakening sites across the desert." "What about the Parathi who don't want to fight?" Minho asked. "Kaylin says they may be more interested in revenge than helping humans." Kaylin nodded gravely. "My people have long memories. The Vex destroyed everything we built, everyone we loved. Some will want to strike back regardless of the cost to others." "Can you convince them to work with us?" Sunho asked. "I can try," Kaylin replied. "But you must understand, my people are warriors first. They will need to see that humans are worthy allies, not just another species seeking protection." Dr. Yunha brought up orbital tracking data. "We're detecting increased activity in the outer system. The Vex scouts may already be here." Admiral Yeonsu stood up. "Then we're out of time for planning. Captain Sunho, begin awakening operations immediately. Dr. Yunha, start preparing our defense systems. And Kaylin, we're going to need your people ready to fight in weeks, not months." As the meeting broke up, Sunho found himself walking beside Kaylin toward the exit. "Are you afraid?" he asked her. She considered the question carefully. I am afraid my people will not wake in time. I am afraid they will wake but refuse to help. But I am not afraid of the Vex themselves." "Why not?" Kalen's eyes glowed brighter for a moment. "Because this time we will not face them alone. Humans fight differently than my people do. Perhaps together we can achieve what neither of us could do separately." Outside the briefing room, alarms began sounding throughout the base. On the main screen, new contacts appeared at the edge of the solar system. The Vex scouts had arrived, and the ancient war was about to begin again. But this time, humanity would stand beside the dragon-born warriors who had once guarded the galaxy. Desert-born dragon kin lay dormant until humanity asked them to fight. Kalen led the human team deeper into Mars than anyone had ever gone before. The elevator descended for over an hour, passing through layers of rock that told the story of the planet's ancient past. When they finally stopped, the doors opened to reveal a sight that took everyone's breath away. The cavern stretched beyond the reach of their lights, its ceiling lost in darkness above. Thousands upon thousands of crystal formations filled the space, each one glowing softly with internal light. The Parathi's sleeping chamber was not just a room, but an entire underground city. Engineer Tajin whistled softly as he surveyed the massive space. "How many are there?" "Nearly 10,000 in this chamber alone," Kalen replied. "There are 7 more chambers like this one scattered beneath the planet's surface." Dr. Yeren, the team's psychologist, stared at the closest crystals in wonder. Each one contained a sleeping Pirathi warrior, perfectly preserved after thousands of years. "What will they be like when they wake up?" Confused, Kalen admitted. "Angry. Afraid. They went to sleep expecting to wake up in a few centuries, not tens of thousands of years. They will need time to understand what has happened to our world." Tajin began setting up the awakening equipment that human engineers had designed based on Kalen's knowledge. The process required massive amounts of energy channeled through specific frequencies that would safely dissolve the crystal chambers. "We can only wake a few at a time," he explained. "The power requirements are enormous, and we need to be careful not to shock their systems." Kalen walked among the sleeping forms of her people, touching certain crystals gently. "I will choose who awakens first. Some of my people are more adaptable than others." She stopped at a crystal that contained a large, imposing figure. Even in sleep, the Pirathi inside looked like a born warrior. His scales were darker than Kalen's, almost red, and his wings were broader and more powerful. "This is Pyrian, war chief of the Flame Guard," Kalen said. "He was my military commander and one of our greatest fighters. But he is also proud and quick to anger." She moved to another crystal, this one containing a smaller, more delicate-looking Pirathi with silver-tinted scales. "And this is Ashara, keeper of ancient knowledge. She is wise but cautious. Together they represent the 2 paths my people might choose." The awakening process began at dawn. Tajin's equipment hummed with power as energy flowed into the first crystal chamber. Slowly, the crystalline material began to dissolve, releasing the Pirathi inside. Pyrian emerged first, his eyes blazing with inner fire as he took his first breath in 50,000 years. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, his powerful frame radiating heat that the humans could feel from several meters away. His first words were spoken in the ancient Pirathi language, but his tone was clearly angry. He looked around the cavern, taking in the human equipment and the strangers surrounding him. Kalen spoke to him quickly in their own language, trying to explain the situation, but Pyrian's response was a roar of rage that echoed through the cavern. He spread his wings and launched himself into the air, circling above them like an angry dragon. "What's he saying?" Commander Donghae asked nervously. He had been sent to coordinate the military aspects of the awakening. "He wants to know why humans are in our sacred chamber," Kalen translated. "He thinks you are invaders who have desecrated our resting place." Pirion landed heavily near the humans, his claws scraping against the stone floor. He spoke again, his voice deep and threatening. "He says humans are weak creatures who steal the worlds of others," Kalen continued. "He wants you to leave immediately." Commander Donghae stepped forward carefully. He had dealt with hostile first contacts before, but never with a 3-meter-tall dragon warrior who could fly and breathe fire. "Tell him we came here in peace," Donghae said. "We want to work together against the Vex." When Kalen translated, Pirion's anger seemed to grow even stronger. He gestured at the sleeping crystals around them and spoke rapidly. "He says, the Vex are our ancient enemy, not yours," Kalen translated. "He questions why humans should be involved in Pirathi affairs." The awakening of Ashara went more smoothly. The elderly Pirathi emerged from her crystal with dignity, studying the humans with curious but cautious eyes. Her silver scales caught the light as she moved, and her manner was calm, despite the confusion she must have felt. She spoke to Kalen in quiet tones, asking many questions about the time that had passed and the current state of the world. When she learned about the human presence on Mars, her reaction was thoughtful rather than angry. "Ashara wants to understand the situation before making judgments," Kalen explained. "She asks if humans are honorable in their dealings with other species." Dr. Yaren had prepared for this question. "Tell her we try to be. We make mistakes, but we learn from them. We've never encountered a species like yours before, but we want to be friends." Over the following days, more Pirathi were awakened in small groups. Each one reacted differently to the news of what had happened to their world and the presence of humans. Some, like Pirion, were openly hostile. They saw humans as invaders who had taken advantage of the Pirathi's absence to claim their world. These warriors wanted to drive the humans away before dealing with any other threats. Others, influenced by Ashara's wisdom, were more open to cooperation. They recognized that both species now faced the same enemy and that working together might be their only chance for survival. The division among the Pirathi created tensions that threatened to tear apart any chance of alliance. Commander Donghae found himself trying to negotiate between two groups of ancient warriors who had very different ideas about humanity's role in their awakening world. "We cannot force them to help us," he reported to Admiral Yeonsu during one of their daily briefings. "If we push too hard, we might turn them all against us." Meanwhile, Taejin worked frantically to improve the awakening process. The Vex scouts had been detected moving through the outer planets, and time was running short. They needed as many Pirathi warriors as possible awakened and ready to fight. "How many have we awakened so far?" Kalen asked during one of the technical briefings. 347, Taejin replied. "But the process is getting more difficult. The deeper chambers require more energy, and some of the crystals are showing signs of damage from age." Kalen looked worried. "We need at least 1,000 warriors to have any chance against a Vex assault fleet. And they need to be united, not divided by suspicion and anger." The breakthrough came when Ashara made a proposal to both sides. She suggested a test that would prove whether humans were worthy allies or merely opportunistic invaders. "Let the humans fight beside us in the first battle," she said through Kalen's translation. "If they prove themselves brave and trustworthy in combat, we will know their true nature." Pirion was skeptical but agreed to the test. If humans can stand against the Vex without running, perhaps they are not as weak as they appear. Commander Donghae accepted the challenge immediately. "When do we start?" His answer came sooner than expected. Alarms began sounding throughout the awakening facility as sensor operators detected new contacts entering the inner solar system. "Vex scout ships," reported the scanning technician. "Multiple contacts heading toward Mars." The first test of the human Pirathi alliance was about to begin whether they were ready or not. General Kyung-soo watched from the observation deck as humans and Pirathi attempted their first joint training exercise. The results were not encouraging. Human pilots struggled to match the speed and agility of flying dragon warriors, while the Pirathi seemed confused by human technology and tactics. "This isn't working," muttered Lieutenant Soyan as she climbed out of her fighter cockpit. Her ship had barely avoided colliding with Pirian during a formation flying exercise. "They don't follow any of our coordination signals." Pirian landed nearby, his wings folding against his back as he approached the frustrated pilot. Through Kalen's translation, he explained his own concerns. "He says human machines are too slow and clumsy," Kalen interpreted. "Pirathi warriors have fought in space for thousands of years. They move by instinct, not by following radio commands." Engineer Junho approached with a tablet full of technical data. He had been working around the clock to find ways to integrate human weapons with Pirathi abilities. "I think I've found a solution," he announced. "Instead of trying to make them fight like us, we need to adapt our technology to work with their natural abilities." He showed them designs for heat-conducting weapons that could channel a Pirathi warrior's natural fire generation into focused energy beams. The weapons were lightweight enough for the dragon warriors to carry while flying, but powerful enough to damage Vex bioships. "Will they use human weapons?" General Kyung-soo asked. Kalen discussed the idea with Pirian and several other warriors. The conversation was animated, with much gesturing and occasional bursts of flame from excited Pirathi. "They are interested," Kalen reported, "but they want to test the weapons in real combat, not just training exercises. Their chance came sooner than expected." Alert sirens began wailing across the Mars defense network as long-range scanners detected incoming threats. "Vex scout ships approaching the asteroid belt," reported the communications officer. "Estimated arrival at Mars orbit in 6 hours. General Kyung-soo made a quick decision. "This is it. Real combat will test our alliance better than any training. Exercise." The combined human Pirathi force that launched from Mars was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships formed the backbone of the fleet, their advanced sensors and long-range weapons providing technological support. Pirathi warriors flew alongside them, their natural abilities augmented by Junho's adapted weapons. Pilot Soyeon found herself partnered with a young Pirathi warrior named Voren. Unlike the older, more traditional warriors, Voren was curious about human technology and eager to learn new tactics. "Stay close to my ship," Soyeon instructed through the translation system they had developed. "I'll guide you to the best attack positions." The Vex scouts were nothing like human ships. They looked like massive insects, made of living metal, their hulls pulsing with biological rhythms. Smaller creatures swarmed around them like antibodies protecting an organism. "Remember the plan," General Kyung-soo's voice came through the communication system. "Human ships engage at long range. Pirathi warriors get in close and target the weak points Kalen identified. The battle began as soon as the fleets came within weapons range." Human missiles streaked across space toward the Vex ships, but most were intercepted by the smaller defender creatures. The enemy's biological defenses were incredibly effective against conventional weapons. But when the Pirathi warriors moved in for close attack, everything changed. Voren dove toward a Vex scout ship, his body glowing with intense heat. The bioship's defenses seemed confused by his approach. They had evolved to stop mechanical weapons, not living beings that could generate their own energy. Voren struck the scout ship's hull with his claws, then channeled his inner fire through Junho's adapted weapon. The focused heat beam cut through the bioship's armor like a knife through soft metal. The enemy vessel convulsed and began bleeding some kind of internal fluid into space. "It's working!" Soyeon called out, as she provided covering fire for Voren's attack. "The Pirathi can get through their defenses." Across the battle zone, other human Pirathi teams were achieving similar successes. The combination of human tactical coordination and Pirathi natural abilities proved devastatingly effective against enemies that had never faced such cooperation. Pirian led the most aggressive assault, targeting the largest Vex scout ship. His experience as a war chief showed as he coordinated attacks with both his fellow Pirathi and the human pilots supporting him. "Human ships, target the defender swarms," he commanded through the translation system. "Pirathi warriors, follow me to the main hull." The coordinated attack overwhelmed the Vex ship's defenses. Human weapons cleared away the smaller defenders, while Pirathi warriors struck at vital points on the main vessel. Within minutes, the massive scout ship was crippled and drifting, but the victory came with a cost. Several human ships had been damaged by Vex bioweapons, and 2 Pirathi warriors had been injured while pressing their attacks too aggressively. As the surviving Vex scouts retreated toward the outer system, both species took stock of what they had learned. The battle had proven that cooperation was possible, but it had also revealed how much work remained to be done. "The Vex will report back to their main fleet," Kalen warned, as the combined forces returned to Mars. "Now they know we have Pirathi warriors fighting alongside humans. They will adapt their tactics accordingly." General Kyung-soo gathered the human and Pirathi commanders for a debriefing session. Despite the language barriers and cultural differences, there was a new sense of mutual respect in the room. "Your warriors fought with incredible courage," he told Pyrian through Kalen's translation, "and your people saved many human lives today." Pyrian's response surprised everyone. "Human pilots are braver than I expected. They stayed in formation even when facing creatures that could easily destroy their ships." Ashara, who had observed the battle from the command center, spoke thoughtfully about what she had witnessed. "This cooperation is something new," Kalen translated her words. "In all our ancient wars against the Vex, we fought alone. Perhaps together we can achieve victories that neither species could win separately." The success of the first battle began to change attitudes among the Pirathi. Warriors who had been suspicious of humans started asking questions about human tactics and technology. The rigid divisions between the species began to blur as both sides recognized their mutual dependence. Engineer Junho worked with Pirathi artificers to improve weapon designs based on combat experience. The Dragon Warriors had ideas about heat channeling that human science had never considered, while human engineering could make their concepts more efficient and reliable. Pilot Soyan spent her off-duty hours learning to communicate directly with Voron and other young Pirathi. They developed a simplified language that combined human technical terms with Pirathi emotional concepts, creating something new that belonged to both species. "How many more scouts do you think they'll send?" Soyan asked Voron during one of their planning sessions. Voron's response, filtered through their improvised language, was sobering. "Many. They will test every defense we have before the main fleet arrives." The next few weeks brought wave after wave of Vex attacks. Each assault was larger and more coordinated than the last, as the enemy hive mind learned from previous failures. But each battle also made the human Pirathi alliance stronger and more effective. By the time long-range sensors detected the approach of the main Vex fleet, the two species had forged something unprecedented in galactic history. They had become true partners in war, combining their strengths while covering each other's weaknesses. The real test of their alliance was still coming, but they would face it together as equals rather than as reluctant allies of convenience. The main Vex fleet filled the space beyond Jupiter like a dark storm cloud. Admiral Changmin watched the long-range displays from the bridge of the human flagship Determination. Hundreds of massive bioships moved in perfect formation, each one larger than the scout vessels that had tested their defenses over the past month. "How many are we looking at?" he asked his sensor operator. "Over 800 large vessels, Admiral, plus thousands of smaller support creatures. It's the largest fleet we've ever detected." Beside him, Kalen studied the same data with experienced eyes. She had seen Vex fleets before, but never this large. "They have grown stronger since my people last fought them. This fleet could consume entire star systems." The combined human Pyrathi defense force gathered near Mars' orbit looked tiny in comparison. Every human ship that could fight had been pressed into service, from military cruisers to converted civilian vessels. Nearly 2,000 Pyrathi warriors had been awakened, but they were still vastly outnumbered. Pirian approached Admiral Changmin with news from the Pyrathi War Council. "My people have agreed to your battle plan," Kalen translated his words. "But many believe this will be our final battle. The Vex have never brought such overwhelming force against a single world." "Then we'll make sure it counts," Admiral Changmin replied. "If we're going down, we're taking as many of them with us as possible." Dr. Minji hurried onto the bridge carrying her latest research data. She had been studying Vex behavior patterns captured during the scout battles, looking for weaknesses in their hive mind coordination. "Admiral, I've found something important," she announced. "The Vex fleet coordination relies on quantum entanglement between their bioships. If we can disrupt that connection, their formation will collapse into chaos." She showed them her analysis on the main screen. The largest ship at the center of their formation is the Hive Coordinator. It maintains the mental link that allows them to act as one organism, but it's also their greatest weakness. Kalen's eyes brightened as she understood the implications. If we destroy the Coordinator, the rest of the fleet becomes individual creatures acting on instinct alone. "Exactly," Dr. Minji confirmed. "But the Coordinator will be heavily protected. We'd need a small, fast strike force to get through their defenses." Admiral Changmin studied the tactical displays. The plan was incredibly dangerous, but it might be their only chance against such overwhelming odds. "How small a force are we talking about?" "Maybe 50 ships at most," Dr. Minji replied. "Any larger, and they'll detect the attack before we reach the target." Pilot Soyan stepped forward. "I volunteer to lead the strike force. Vorin and I have worked together in every battle so far. We know how to coordinate human and Pyrathi tactics." Her Pyrathi partner flew down from the upper deck where he had been perched. Through their improvised language, he expressed his agreement with the plan. "The young ones are brave," Pirian commented through Kalen's translation. "But this mission will require more than courage. It will need perfect coordination between our species." Admiral Changmin made his decision. "Soyon, you'll lead the strike force. Select your best pilots and work with Pirian to choose the Pyrathi warriors. The rest of us will create a diversion to draw their attention." The battle began at dawn on Mars time. The main human fleet engaged the Vex forces at maximum range, drawing the bulk of the enemy fleet into a running fight among the asteroid fields. Explosions lit up the darkness as bioships and human vessels traded devastating blows. While the main battle raged, Soyan's strike force approached the Vex coordinator from below the orbital plane. Her small fleet of modified fighters stayed close to Pyrathi warriors who used their natural abilities to mask the ship's energy signatures. "Remember the plan," Soyan broadcast to her mixed force. "Human ships provide covering fire and electronic warfare. Pyrathi warriors go for the critical strikes. We get one chance at this." The coordinator ship was even larger than their intelligence had suggested. It stretched for kilometers, its biometal hull pulsing with the rhythms of the hive mind it controlled. Smaller defender creatures swarmed around it like protective antibodies. "Beginning our approach," Soyan announced as her force accelerated toward the target. The defenders reacted immediately, launching swarms of bioprojectiles at the approaching strike force. Human ships used their electronic countermeasures to confuse the targeting systems, while Pyrathi warriors weaved between the attacks with impossible agility. Vorin flew alongside Soyan's fighter, his body glowing with inner fire as he prepared for the final assault. Other Pyrathi warriors spread out in attack formation, their heat-channeling weapons ready to strike at the coordinator's vital points. "Now!" Soyan called out as they reached optimal attack range. The coordinated assault was everything they had trained for. Human weapons overwhelmed the coordinator's outer defenses, while Pyrathi warriors dove toward the massive ship's hull. Their heat-based attacks cut through bioarmor that had been designed to resist conventional weapons. Vorin was among the first to reach the target. He landed on the coordinator's surface and began cutting toward its central nervous system with focused beams of superheated energy. Other Pirathi warriors followed his lead, striking at critical points along the ship's length. But the coordinator wasn't defenseless. As the Pirathi warriors attacked its hull, it released clouds of toxic gas and sent electrical surges through its own armor. Several dragon warriors were forced to retreat as their bodies were overwhelmed by the ship's defenses. The central nerve cluster is heavily shielded, Vorin reported through their communication link. We need more concentrated firepower. Soyon made a split-second decision. All human ships, target the shielded area. Give our warriors a clear path to the nerve center. The human fighters concentrated their fire on a single point, their combined weapons creating a breach in the coordinator's defenses. Vorin and 3 other Pirathi warriors dove through the opening, disappearing into the ship's interior. For several terrifying minutes, there was no word from the assault team. Then explosions began rippling through the coordinator's hull as the Pirathi warriors found and destroyed its central nervous system. The effect on the Vex fleet was immediate and dramatic. Ships that had been moving in perfect coordination suddenly began acting independently. Some continued attacking the human fleet, while others turned on each other in confusion. The unified threat became scattered chaos. "It's working!" Admiral Changmin's voice came through the communication system. "The enemy formation is collapsing. All ships, press the attack." The battle turned into a rout as human and Pirathi forces overwhelmed the confused Vex creatures. Without their hive coordination, the bioships were dangerous but predictable opponents. The combined fleet systematically destroyed them one by one. By the time the last Vex ship was eliminated, both species had paid a heavy price, nearly half. The human fleet was damaged or destroyed, and many Pirathi warriors had been injured or killed in the fierce fighting. But they had won. The ancient enemy that had consumed countless worlds was defeated, at least in this part of the galaxy. As the survivors gathered near Mars, representatives from both species met to discuss their future. The battle had proven that humans and Pirathi could work together as equals, combining their strengths to achieve impossible victories. "My people will not return to sleep," Pirian announced through Kalen's translation. "Mars is our home, but it is also your home now. We will share it as partners." Admiral Changmin smiled as he shook hands with the Pirathi war chief. "Together, we can explore the galaxy and make sure threats like the Vex never grow this strong again." In the months that followed, the joint human-Pirathi civilization began to flourish. The dragon warriors shared their ancient knowledge while humans contributed their technological innovation. Mars became a symbol of what different species could accomplish when they worked together. And in the deep desert where Minho had first discovered the crystal formations, new structures rose from the sand. These were not sleeping chambers, but living spaces where both species could work and grow together under the red Martian sky. The dragons had risen again, not as conquerors, but as partners in humanity's greatest adventure among the stars.